Who loves you? Well, this is obviously a love poem, isn't it? It must be. Well, yes, it is. But it's also a very subtle protest poem. And it's a protest that at first I reacted against. But you look at the news and you think, actually, she's got a point, hasn't she? So it's the 8th of April and here's Angelina Jolie speaking to the G8. And she's talking about a war crime, rape. And rape has now become a grave war crime. It's been used as a weapon of war. Here we are, it's 2013, and this hasn't happened yet. What's going on in our world? And this is the UK. 9,000 male rape victims, 69,000 female. That's incredible, isn't it? And this reminds me of a bit of name dropping here. Anna Mays, England's most successful netball coach of all time, but also teaches psychology at university. I remember when she was training, I took the mickey out of her for taking the taxi everywhere at night, and she said to me, if you knew the figures like I do of how young women are attacked, you wouldn't take the mick. This is serious. So let's look at some figures. So 95,000 people estimated to be victims of rape in the UK last year. What happens to these people? So only 15,000 go to the police, 3,850 go to court, and only 1,070 are convicted. That's incredible, isn't it? And so that's what this poem, I think, is protesting about. This kind of society in which men who do rape basically get away with it, and women are continually and always vulnerable. And the genius of this poem isn't that it's angry, but that it's subtle. It's still a love poem. And if you want to read more protest poems, or actually write some, visit this amazing website, Slip. I promise you, you won't be disappointed. It's a brilliant resource and one I wish I'd discovered years before. So the first verse starts almost as a mocking, gentle satire on the worrying mother. I worry about you travelling in those mystical machines. And the overdone alliteration here of mystical machines to describe aeroplanes makes this figure appear slightly ridiculous, as though her fears shouldn't really be taken seriously. Every day people fall from the clouds dead. And this is almost a comedy. The voice is ridiculous. The imagery is also ridiculous. People don't fall from the clouds dead. Aeroplanes are famously the most famously safe form of transport in the world. And so our speaker immediately feels ridiculous. And that's deliberate, because there's a real subtle change coming in the poem later, and Duffy's preparing the ground for it. And the tone changes here with single syllable words. Breathe in and out, and in and out, easy. And we suddenly feel a change of pace. This is an instruction, but it's also calming. Safety, safely, safe home. And this calming nature and the repetition that we get in the syllables and the in and the in and the in, and this chorus of safety, safely, safe, drives home the kind of liturgy and prayer that we're used to in Duffy's poems. It feels like a prayer, and suddenly we take this mother a bit more seriously. She's praying for the safety of her child. The second verse follows a very similar pattern. We start off with a fear that is slightly ridiculous, but not in the first line. Your photograph is in the fridge, smiles when the light comes on. It's slightly odd, isn't it? We expect the photograph to be on the front of the fridge. That's where parents keep their children's artwork, their reports, their photographs. Probably that's what your parents do. Here's my fridge. My children are 17 and 16, and we still do it, look. And down there's the revision timetables that they've set. It's something that I think is common to many households. It looks ridiculous to an outsider, but actually many of us do it. However, this mother's fear is more pronounced. The photograph is kept in the fridge as though it's out of harm's way, and crucially in the light. Whenever the door opens, the light comes on. This could be a religious reference to light, and it reminds us of the prayer-like nature of the poem, but it's also being out of darkness and out of danger. All the time, people are burnt in the public places. And do you remember that alliteration we had earlier on mystical machines that made it seem ridiculous? Here, the public places are not so ridiculous. We've seen these photographs. All right, we do object to this all the time. That's hyperbole, a huge exaggeration. But this fear is possibly as ridiculous as the aeroplane falling out of the sky, but maybe not. Rest where the cool trees drop to a gentle shade. And we can suddenly feel again a change of mood. Here it was the single syllable words. But here that changes. And we get the assonance of rest and where and gentle. And these are soft sounds. They echo the gentleness of thought. Here the mother wants peace and tranquility for their child, and it's linked again to the chorus which we talked about before. And again the assonance of shade and safely, safely, safe brings us to a slow halt. It's gentle, and the child will live completely unharmed. In the third verse, the mother's fears have become more realistic, although there is still an element of comedy. Don't lie down on the sands where the hole in the sky is. And this is obviously the ozone layer, and it sounds ridiculous, but actually the ozone layer has caused damage to huge swathes of southern skies, and the danger of skin damage is actually very real. You don't go out in Australia without covering yourself with sun cream. Too many people being gnawed to shreds. And this is a bit strange here. This word might be laughable. How are people being chewed? It's not as though animals are chewing them. So what is it? Is it the way of life? Is it society? And I think there's a subtle shift is taking place here in the parents' worries, and also how realistically we should take them. And now we can see that the worry is partly caused by the child. This is a child who's gone travelling across oceans, but listen to what the parent wants. Send me your voice, however it comes across oceans. She'll accept a phone call or an email or a postcard. And there's a sense here that the child has drifted off on some exciting journey of travel, a year out, a gap year, whatever it is, self-discovery. But they've not thought about the parents' feelings at all, and rarely write, rarely phone, rarely communicate. It's something that you might not take too seriously, but actually there's this huge gap left in the parent's life. And again, Duffy uses assonance really cleverly here, and the O sounds drive us from a hard sound to the pleading O of oceans. So we've got voice, however, comes across oceans, and we can feel that pleading in the parent's voice, which again is brought back with the chorus or the refrain of the prayer. And now the prayer becomes much more real. We have a lot more sympathy for the parent, for the mother, and Duffy has crafted this really carefully so that the final verse carries real power. The loveless men and homeless boys are out there and angry. And this is what brings us to that introduction I gave to the poem, to the role of men in society and the danger that many of them pose. And actually, she's not necessarily blaming them entirely. They might be right to be angry, but that, of course, is no comfort to any woman who gets abused, and there's no justification for it. The mother's protest here isn't against men, although obviously that's what's underpinning the poem, but it's against the ignorance of her child, who's taking no notice of the fact that the world is really like this. And this child is drifting through the world as though it's an entirely safe place, which the mother can see it isn't. Nightly, people end their lives in the shortcut. And there's a huge irony here. It sounds on one description like a suicide, and we might imagine the shortcut being something like someone slashing their wrists. And this might, if you like, describe the mother's mood, a mood of despair. But actually she's also describing what happens to someone who doesn't think about the consequences of their actions. They take a shortcut and they're attacked. It happens all the time, nightly. And now this sounds like the hopeless hyperbole that we had in the first verse, where every day people fall from the clouds. But of course that was rubbish. Or all the time people are burnt in the public places. Well, that was hyperbole and that was rubbish. Here, too many people were being gnawed to shreds, and we weren't really sure what she meant, but now here we know. And this isn't an exaggeration. It feels like it, but it's true. This happens all the time in every country in the world, including ours, one that we think of as civilised, safe. And then the prayer is brought back into deliberate religious language. Walk in the light. This is a Christian reference that we're very used to in sermons in church, in the Bible, and of course it reminds us of what happened in the fridge when the light comes on. And so we've got a very strong Christian feel to the poem now, and the prayer has some real urgency to it. Steadily hurry towards me. And there's that plea from the parent again, from this mother. Don't abandon me, come back to me, but safe. And the repetition here emphasises that this may be a forlorn hope. She's having to repeat it again and again because her child isn't coming home yet. And then there's this very curious use of brackets here. Who loves you? And it echoes the title, Who Loves You? And we assumed, probably correctly, that this was a question that the speaker was asking, and the reply is, I do. But now, when it's placed in this verse, with the loveless men and the homeless boys, now it's a question asked of the daughter, who's keeping you from me? What kind of man is it who loves you? Are you safe? And it's a fear, I think, that we can all understand a little better now and seems less ridiculous. And I love the craftsmanship of this poem, where Duffy can take a ridiculous figure, transform her within 17 lines, and give her worries that certainly I as a parent can completely understand. And I didn't expect to when I started reading the poem. And I think that takes a lot of skill.